September 20th, 1999. Hurricane Floyd nearly misses Savannah's coast and tears a path of death and destruction up the eastern seaboard, leaving almost 60 dead and nearly $5 billion worth of damage in its wake. It's not the first time a major hurricane has had the coastal empire and lowcountry in its sights, and it won't be the last. Will we be lucky again this year and avoid catastrophe? And what can you do day in and day out to keep your family safe in other severe weather scenarios? We have those answers and more in Surviving the Storm, a special presentation by WJCL News with Chief Storm Tracker Meteorologist Jeff Kirk, Morning Storm Tracker Meteorologist Jonathan Myers, and Weekend Storm Tracker Meteorologist Samara Theodore.
Thanks for joining us for Surviving the Storm. We are your WJCL News Storm Trackers. I'm Jeff Kirk. With me is Jonathan Myers and Samara Theodore.
In this show, we'll provide you with valuable information to keep your family safe from a variety of severe weather scenarios, including hurricanes.
That's right, but first, Samara recently took a look on how Georgia Emergency Management Agency officials are preparing you for a hurricane.
As we enter the 2014 hurricane season, state and local leaders have been getting ready. They held a statewide hurricane drill prepping in case a Category 3 hurricane were to hit our area. It's called Hurric's 2014. It's a 3-day hurricane drill that took place earlier this month, and the Georgia Emergency Management Agency is in charge. Teams are put through high-stress hurricane scenarios, focusing on pre- and post-storm landfall. The National Guard says during Hurricane Katrina, they experienced a lot of fires before the storm hit land.
Our aircraft were used for putting out house fires because the roadways and all the debris and the flooding the fire trucks weren't able to get to the houses. So what we've got going on is our air crews doing refresher training, doing some currency training, picking up water loads and taking them out.
The hurricane drill was held in 4 cities across the state of Georgia: Savannah, Macon, Fort Valley, and Atlanta, all in efforts to keep our state prepared in the event of a hurricane disaster.
Thanks for that, Samara. Each and every day we track weather systems from right here in our new tracking center. We look at various models from the National Weather Service and monitor atmospheric conditions that keep you ahead of the storm. With hurricane season gearing up, I wanted to share with you the hurricane rating system known as the Saffir-Simpson scale. On the scale of 1 to 5, a Category 1 hurricane has winds of 74 to 95 miles per hour, and it's mainly minor damage. There are some power outages and trees down. Hurricane David, the last hurricane that hit Savannah in 1979, was a Category 1 storm. Now, a Category 2, you start getting the power outages lasting a good bit longer, days to possibly weeks. The wind speeds are going up with this, you get more and more damage. A Category 3, you're talking about wind speeds of over 111 miles per hour. Cat 3 and higher is considered a major hurricane. We're talking extensive damage. We're talking power outages for a long time. Then we get up into monster hurricanes. Category 4, Hurricane Hugo in 1989 that hit Charleston was a Category 4 with winds of 135 miles per hour. We've got extensive to catastrophic damage, and power outages can last weeks to months. And the worst kind is a Category 5, extremely destructive, wind speeds over 156 miles per hour. It was determined that Hurricane Andrew in 1992 that hit South Florida was a Category 5. Obviously the damage is tremendous with that, almost indescribable. Let's hope that nothing like that hits anywhere near us anytime soon.
Let's take a look at a severe weather awareness tip. What is the difference between a hurricane watch and a hurricane warning? A hurricane watch means that hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours. A hurricane warning means hurricane conditions can be expected within 36 hours. A hurricane has winds that register 74 miles per hour or greater.
This severe weather tip is brought to you by Georgia Power, a Southern company.
As we said in the open of the show, Hurricane Floyd threatened our coast 15 years ago. Since then, we've been pretty lucky. But what would happen if a hurricane comes our way? I'm going to take a look at one of the largest and most overlooked dangers of hurricanes in our area, the storm surge. The greatest threat from a hurricane is storm surge. This is when high winds move right across the ocean and produces huge swells that move on shore. This is not to be mistaken with a tsunami, from which it comes from an earthquake. The #1 killer in a hurricane is storm surge. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina storm surge caused at least 1,500 deaths. Now, there are a couple of factors that go in how large a storm surge is. First off is the continental shelf. A shallow shelf like we have, coastal Georgia and coastal South Carolina, will produce a greater storm surge than in steeper shelf waters. For example, a storm that makes landfall in shallow shelf waters may produce a 30-foot storm surge compared to the same storm hitting a steeper shelf waters will only produce a 9-foot storm surge. So that just shows you the difference between the two. And also another factor is the size of the storm and the speed of the storm. You could have a storm surge that could last up to 12 hours during a slow moving storm. Now, our area here, coastal Georgia and also coastal South Carolina. Here's a storm surge map, for example, for Chatham County. You can see it here, and then look at this, Category 1, all the islands will be flooded. Also, this includes Tybee, almost up to downtown Savannah. But once you go to a Category 2, all the islands are flooded along the rivers, along Highway 17, and even up close to I-95. And you go to the Category 3 storm surge, this will flood most of downtown except along Bay Street and also the airport in Savannah near Pooler. So you can see even up to Category 4, less and less land is there. And of course, the worst case scenario will be a Category 5, 31.5-foot storm surge across the area. Of course, the islands will be flooded. One little part in downtown Savannah near Bay Street would stay above flood stage. Also at Savannah Hilton Head International Airport, also Hunter Army Airfield, their airstrip area would stay above flood stage. But you can see most of the county from beaches all the way to I-95 would be underwater during Category 5. Always remember, evacuations are issued for your area. Heed the warning.
Let's take a look at a severe weather awareness tip to prepare for severe weather or a natural disaster. First, know what emergencies are most likely to occur in your community. Here, the most likely severe weather scenarios include hurricanes, tornadoes, and areas of coastal or flash flooding. Have a disaster plan and emergency preparedness kit that includes flashlights, batteries, water, non-perishable food items, personal documents, cash, and more.
This severe weather tip is brought to you by Georgia Power, a Southern company. Pick up your Savannah Morning News Hurricane Guide while supplies last at participating Inmark stores for evacuation routes, severe weather tips, and more. Don't get caught in the path of severe weather. Text Storm Tracker to 36729 and we'll send you severe weather updates from our tracking center that will keep you and your family out of harm's way. We now return to Surviving the Storm, presented by Georgia Power, a Southern company.
Preparation is one of the fundamental keys of keeping your family safe during severe weather. Let's take a look at some of the things that you can do to prepare for a severe weather event.
It's a wonderful opportunity or a wake-up call to say, okay, everybody, we could be affected by this. If we are, have you got a family preparedness plan? Have you looked to see what you're going to take with you when you evacuate?
Here locally, we haven't had a landfalling hurricane since 1979. Maybe that's why only 13% of people are prepared for a hurricane. Because of that, important life and property saving steps are missed.
Probably the biggest thing that people forget is to actually get in and make plans and double check, rehearse, make sure that you can get the things in your car that you're planning on putting in your car and that you know where you're going to go.
Being prepared for a hurricane, you must have a hurricane supply kit. Here are some of the items you're going to need. Most importantly, at least 1 gallon of water per person for 3 to 7 days. Also, non-perishable and canned goods for 3 to 7 days. First aid with medicines and prescription drugs. And if you have to go to a shelter, blankets, pillows, and also extra clothing. And don't forget those flashlights and batteries.
2014 has already been an incredibly wild year for weather. From bitter snowstorms that covered the Northeast in snow for months to our own southern freeze. Samara took a look at what the story of this year's weather is so far.
Earlier this year, powerful storms ripped through Mayflower and Valonia, Arkansas. And though the storm systems moved quickly, the physical and emotional damage still lingers behind. That Sunday, the National Weather Service reported a tornado crossing Highway I-40 in Arkansas that was nearly half a mile wide.
Our downtown area seems like it's completely level. There's a few buildings partially standing, but the amount of damage is tremendous. Utilities, there's gas lines spewing, of course power lines down, houses are just a pile of brick.
Not only did things get active in the plains, but this past winter was one for the record books. A few inches of snow put the city of Atlanta at a complete standstill. And that same storm glazed our Screven County over with ice. The weight of the ice brought down trees, limbs, and power lines.
Restaurants, everything. We're about out of gas. It's only like 2 places we can get gas and stuff from. It's just real hectic today.
And as the chill of winter left the air, spring entered with flames torching the night sky. These wildfires ripped through trees and brush along the Texas Panhandle. The Hutchinson Emergency Management reported wind gusts at 50 miles per hour, with crews continuing to help fight the fire from all over the area.
Dalhart, Sanford, Hartley, Randall County, Cactus, LaForce, and I'm sure there's many more I haven't even seen that were already assigned prior to our arrival.
And just around the corner is the 2014 hurricane season. And although forecasters are predicting a relatively low amount of storms, it only takes one to impact an area. It only takes one to impact our area. But here in the Storm Tracking Weather Center, we've got you covered. Reporting on this year's wild weather, I'm Storm Tracker meteorologist Samara Theodore, working for you.
Pick up your Savannah Morning News Hurricane Guide while supplies last at participating Inmark stores for evacuation routes, severe weather tips, and more. Don't get caught in the path of severe weather. Text Storm Tracker to 36729 and we'll send you severe weather updates from our tracking center that will keep you and your family out of harm's way. We now return to Surviving the Storm, presented by Georgia Power, a Southern company.
Low Country Bureau Chief Larry Sproul spoke with Bluffton emergency officials about what residents can expect if a major storm bears down on the coast.
Bluffton emergency officials aren't taking this hurricane season lightly. There are a lot of changes, from lane reversals to enforcing a mandatory evacuation.
I think we're ready.
Ready and prepared is the motto at Bluffton Fire Township this hurricane season. This is the first year for Deputy Chief Rick Kramer as Operations Division Chief. His main responsibility this storm season?
We want our citizens to make sure that they have a solid plan in place.
Kramer says that's the difference between life and death.
Make sure that our citizens have evacuated. And then obviously if there are those who haven't evacuated, we then of course would get the appropriate information, such as next of kin and contact information. This is something that we look at every year prior to hurricane season.
But this year Bluffton officials made a few changes to the plan.
And we make sure that we have appropriate lodging for our personnel, make sure that we have meals if we have to come for an extended period of time, that we have enough food for our people. We have to think about things like diesel fuel and gasoline for all of our vehicles.
Kramer says there is an evacuation plan for Highway 278.
The severity of the storm will dictate if there is a lane reversal. Anything over a Category 3 storm, we actually travel inland around 70 to 90 miles.
Now, the South Carolina Department of Transportation will shut down all swing and drawbridges when winds reach 24 miles per hour or more, or if a mandatory evacuation is ordered, therefore making it vital you obey the evacuation order when issued.
We can't predict everything, but we do our best to make sure that we are ready for the next storm.
June 1st is the first day of hurricane season. Now, here are some hurricane preparation tips. Make plans to move your boat out of the water. Decide your evacuation route now. Call ahead to check routes to other counties. And last but not least, check your insurance coverage. 1979 was the last time a major hurricane hit the Low Country, and the storm was named Hurricane David. Reporting here in the studio, Larry Sproul, WJCL News, working for you.
Did you know that you can find out your Storm Tracker forecast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's easy. Just visit WJCL.com and click on the Weather tab. You'll have immediate access to your storm tracker forecast, as well as current conditions, satellite and radar imagery, severe weather alerts, and more. Or download our mobile app to hold the power of the WJCL News Tracking Center in the palm of your hand.
Pick up your Savannah Morning News Hurricane Guide while supplies last at participating Inmark stores for evacuation routes, severe weather tips, and more. Don't get caught in the path of severe weather. Text Storm Tracker to 36729 and we'll send you severe weather updates from our tracking center that will keep you and your family out of harm's way. We now return to Surviving the Storm, presented by Georgia Power, a Southern company.
Well, now it's time to talk about what we expect may happen this year. The most important thing in a tropical season is where a storm ends up going, not necessarily the number of storms, but we do try to get an idea of the number of storms just to see how active a year may be. Let's take a look first at an average hurricane season. Number of named storms on average over a period of time, 11. Number of hurricanes, 6. And number of major hurricanes is 2. A major hurricane is a storm that is a Category 3 or higher. So let's see what the prediction is for this year. Now, there are several reasons why things vary from year to year. One of the big things is the situation out in the ocean with water temperatures and whether or not we're in an El Nino. Now, this year, the tropical Atlantic water temperatures look like they may be a little bit below average. And we're not talking about a lot, but even just a little bit makes it harder for storms to form out in the Atlantic. Now, they may be able to strengthen some or get better developed as they get closer to the U.S., even when the water temperatures are below average. But this is an indicator that there may not be a large number of storms. That's just one, though. There's other things we look at, too. And one of the big things is what the state of the water is out in the Pacific Ocean. We're expecting an El Nino to develop. And what happens there is you get a warmer water developing off the coast of South America. And when that happens, studies have correlated that to higher amounts of wind shear in the Atlantic during tropical season. And wind shear disrupts hurricanes, making them harder to form. So this prediction comes from Colorado State University. Dr. Bill Gray, famous for making his hurricane predictions on number of storms, and his prediction and their team's prediction for this year is 9 named storms. Now that's a couple below the average. That's the numbers. 3 hurricanes, and one of those being a major hurricane. Now, if we have a season like that, that's a pretty quiet year in terms of numbers. But again, I have to caution you that it's not the number of storms that form, it's how many. Back in 1992, there was not a named storm until late August, but that hurricane was Andrew. And we all know what happened with that in South Florida, so it only takes one. But we take a look at similar conditions to past years, and one of those years being 1957. And we see that there were some storm tracks well out in the ocean. There was a tropical storm that came up through Georgia and dumped some rain. But overall, not a terribly active year. We look back at past years that had similar conditions leading into the hurricane season and compare tracks and try to get an idea of what may happen. In '63, a similar season, there was a hurricane that rambled just off the southeast coast for a while, making loops, but it did never make landfall, and then it went out to sea. Let's check out another analog year. That's 1965. Looks like there was a tropical storm that came up through Georgia, dumped some rainfall, but no major landfalls near us. And then as we go to 1997, that year we had a major El Nino. We're not expecting that strong of one, but that year was pretty quiet. There were some storms off the coast. There was a tropical storm that came by to our north and brought some rain to the southeast. And finally, another year that was similar and many characteristics, 2002, we had some storms go by. In fact, we had a tropical storm actually brush the coast. That was Kyle. But that went on. It brought some rain to us and went on towards the northeast. But none of those years brought any kind of significant hurricanes to our area. As we look at direct hits in the past, it was a lot more active as you go back 100 to 150 years ago. We had 3 hurricanes hit in the 1890s. And that's pretty amazing when you consider that this decade, we've gone as much as 32 years without getting hit by a hurricane. And that was from 1947 to 1979. This is the last hurricane that hit Savannah directly. That was Hurricane David. But after that, it's been 35 years since we've been hit by a hurricane. So we are treading with time here. It's a matter of time before we get hit by one, so we all need to be prepared.
Pick up your Savannah Morning News Hurricane Guide while supplies last at participating Inmark stores for evacuation routes, severe weather tips, and more.
We hope if you've enjoyed spending some time with us this evening and that the information you've received will be helpful this hurricane season and for any severe weather scenario you may be faced with.
It's important to remember that preparedness is key when dealing with severe weather, from thunderstorms to tornadoes and hurricanes. Let's take one more look at how you can be prepared too.
First, have a disaster plan and an emergency preparedness kit ready. For starters, your kit should include water, non-perishable food items, personal documents, cash, clothes, medicine, flashlights, and batteries.
For a list of tips, emergency preparedness list, your storm tracker forecast, current conditions, and interactive radar, visit the weather tab on WJCL.com.
Or download the WJCL News app for power of the WJCL News Tracking Center in the palm of your hand.
Thanks for joining us and have a great and safe summer.